Lennox Lewis, once hailed as the last undisputed heavyweight champion, is now 59 years old in 2025, and the story of his life has taken a tragic turn. Once known for his calm composure and devastating power, Lewis is now facing declining health, haunting regrets, and a life far removed from the bright lights of boxing glory. In this video, we'll uncover his rise, his fall, and the dark truth about what Lennox Lewis is really going through today. To understand why Lennox Lewis's life at 59 feels so tragic, you have to start with his beginnings in West Ham, London. Born in 1965 to Jamaican parents, Lennox grew up in poverty after his father abandoned the family when he was just a child. His mother, Violet, worked tirelessly to provide, but money was always tight. Growing up in the East End meant daily exposure to crime, violence, and instability. For young Lennox, the streets were as much a battleground as any boxing ring would later become. He was tall for his age, but that only made him more of a target. Bullied and constantly in fights at school, Lennox quickly learned that survival required toughness. By his teenage years, he was drifting dangerously close to the edge. The local streets offered easy distractions, gangs, petty crime, and trouble that could have swallowed him whole. But his mother, determined not to lose her son to the streets, pushed him toward boxing as a way to channel his anger and energy. At 13, he walked into a boxing gym for the first time. What began as a way to defend himself quickly became an obsession. The discipline, the structure, and the promise of escape from poverty gave him direction. But even then, there was a darkness lingering beneath the surface. Lennox later admitted that he fought not just for victory, but to bury the rage and insecurity of a childhood spent feeling abandoned. By the time he was 15, his mother had moved the family to Canada, seeking a better life. This relocation would prove pivotal. Canada gave Lennox new opportunities, but it also forced him to start over. He was a foreigner, mocked for his accent, viewed as an outsider. Boxing became his only refuge, his only means of proving his worth. Coaches quickly noticed his incredible size, reach, and natural athleticism. With long arms, a heavy jab, and surprising agility for his size, Lennox began carving out a reputation on the amateur scene. But while his career was building, his personal life remained marked by loneliness. Friends remembered him as quiet, almost aloof, a young man who didn't quite fit in. The abandonment of his father left a scar that never fully healed, and even in success, he carried a chip on his shoulder. The tragedies of his early years, the poverty, the violence, the absence of a father figure, would shape him forever. Lennox Lewis didn't just box to win medals, he boxed to survive. And as we'll see, that survival instinct carried him to the top of the world, but it also left him with scars that time has only deepened. The turning point came in 1988 at the Seoul Olympics. After years of honing his craft in Canada, Lennox Lewis entered the Games representing his adopted country. He wasn't favored to win. Few outside of hardcore boxing circles even knew his name. But when the dust settled, Lennox stood at the top of the podium, Olympic gold medal hanging around his neck, having defeated Riddick Bowe in the final. The victory was monumental. Canada hadn't produced a heavyweight boxing champion in decades, and suddenly Lennox was their golden boy. But with that triumph came a burden he hadn't anticipated: expectation. Overnight, he was no longer just a promising fighter. He was supposed to be the future of heavyweight boxing. The transition to the professional ranks was swift. Promoters hyped him as a once-in-a-generation talent, an athlete with the size of a giant, but the finesse of a technician. His long jab, his devastating right hand, and his calm demeanor made him a nightmare for opponents. Early wins against veterans like Gary Mason and Tony Tucker showcased his potential, but success brought pressure. The media labeled him arrogant, aloof, and cold. Fans compared him endlessly to other rising heavyweights, particularly Riddick Bowe, Evander Holyfield, and later Mike Tyson. Unlike Tyson, who embraced the role of ferocious villain, Lennox's quiet personality often came across as distant. He wasn't flamboyant, he wasn't theatrical, and that meant fans didn't always connect with him the way they did with his rivals. Privately, the weight of expectation gnawed at him. The young man who once boxed for survival was now boxing for an entire nation's pride. Canada claimed him, Britain wanted him back, and promoters saw him as a global commodity. For Lennox, the sport was becoming less about personal expression and more about shouldering the hopes of millions. He later admitted that during this time, he began feeling increasingly isolated. People saw the champion, not the man, he once said. He struggled to form close relationships outside the ring, and those who did get close often described him as guarded. Fame gave him recognition, but it also took away privacy, trust, and a sense of normal life. Olympic gold gave Lennox Lewis the keys to greatness, but it also chained him to expectations he could never escape. And as the pressure mounted, so too did the cracks that would later haunt his personal and professional life. By the early 1990s, Lennox Lewis was carving his way through the heavyweight division with an efficiency that left opponents bewildered. His frame, standing 6 feet 5 inches with an 84-inch reach, gave him natural advantages, but it was his discipline and technical mastery that truly set him apart. He wasn't reckless like Mike Tyson or raw like Riddick Bowe. Lennox boxed with patience, using his stiff jab like a spear, breaking down opponents until the perfect moment came to unleash his right hand. His rise was punctuated by major statement wins. In 1992, he demolished Donovan "Razor" Ruddock, a feared puncher many believed could challenge for the title. Lennox didn't just beat him, he dismantled him in 2 brutal rounds, showing the world that he belonged among the heavyweight elite. That same year, he was awarded the WBC Heavyweight Championship after Riddick Bowe famously threw the belt into a trash can rather than face him. For Lennox, it was both a crowning moment and a bitter one. He had the belt, but not the fight that could have cemented his legitimacy. Over the next decade, Lewis would dominate names like Tony Tucker, Frank Bruno, Tommy Morrison, and David Tua. He unified titles, fought across continents, and carried himself with a calm, almost regal composure. He wasn't flashy, and he wasn't interested in theatrics. His famous declaration, "I am the last undisputed heavyweight champion of the world," would later prove prophetic. But his personality often created distance between him and the fans. Where Tyson's rage and Holyfield's grit inspired emotional followings, Lennox's quiet, measured demeanor made him seem cold. Critics called him arrogant, even robotic. Promoters struggled to market him. Despite being the most skilled heavyweight of his era, he rarely received the respect or love that his accomplishments deserved. Behind the scenes, Lennox was a lonely figure. He was wealthy, powerful, and respected, but he lived in isolation. Training camps were grueling, and his trust in others was limited. He often said that boxing was a solitary sport. You're in the ring alone, and you live your life alone. For him, success meant sacrifice. Relationships crumbled, friends drifted, and his world narrowed to the ring. By the late 90s, Lewis was cementing himself as the man to beat, but as dominant as he looked, there were cracks forming. Boxing is cruel in that way. One punch can undo years of discipline, and Lennox Lewis, for all his greatness, would soon learn just how fragile dominance could be. For all his mastery, Lennox Lewis's career was defined as much by his shocking defeats as by his victories. In September 1994, at the height of his momentum, he faced Oliver McCall in London. On paper, Lennox was the clear favorite. He had the height, the power, and the skill advantage. But boxing is unforgiving, and one mistake can end everything. In the second round, McCall landed a looping right hand that crashed against Lennox's jaw. The champion's legs buckled beneath him. He staggered, tried to rise, but the referee waved it off. Lennox Lewis, the future of heavyweight boxing, had been knocked out in front of his home crowd. The shock was seismic. Critics pounced, calling him overrated, soft, and exposed. Fans who had been reluctant to embrace him now dismissed him entirely. For Lennox, the defeat wasn't just physical, it was psychological. He later admitted that the humiliation haunted him, that he replayed the knockout in his head countless times. He changed trainers, bringing in the legendary Emanuel Steward, who rebuilt him from the ground up. Steward taught him patience, balance, and the discipline to fight tall rather than brawling. Together, they forged the version of Lennox Lewis that would dominate the heavyweight division for the next decade. But the scars of that loss never faded. They lingered in whispers from critics, in doubts from promoters, and most of all, in Lennox's own mind. Even after he avenged McCall years later, the fear of vulnerability lingered. Then, in 2001, history repeated itself. Against Hasim Rahman in South Africa, Lewis was caught once again, this time with a thunderous overhand right in the 5th round. His body collapsed to the canvas, his eyes glazed over. The heavyweight king had been dethroned again in devastating fashion. The Rahman loss was perhaps even more damaging than McCall. Lennox had entered the fight distracted, more interested in his burgeoning film career and promotional obligations than training. He underestimated Rahman, and it cost him. The knockout was replayed endlessly, and the narrative hardened. Lennox Lewis was great but fragile. One clean shot could undo him. These knockouts revealed the duality of Lennox Lewis. On one hand, he was brilliant, perhaps the most technically skilled heavyweight since Ali. On the other, he was human, vulnerable, and haunted by the possibility of being exposed. Those defeats left lasting marks not just on his career, but on his psyche. And while he would eventually redeem himself, reclaiming his throne with brutal vengeance against Rahman and others, those dark nights planted seeds of self-doubt that would follow him long into retirement. Even today, at 59, as he faces declining health and the weight of age, those ghosts remain. A reminder that no matter how dominant, every champion is one punch away from tragedy. If Lennox Lewis's story ended with Oliver McCall and Hasim Rahman, his career might have been remembered as one of wasted potential. But Lewis, unlike many heavyweights, was defined by his ability to rise from failure and reclaim what was his. After both of his knockout losses, he came back stronger, sharper, and more determined, proving that redemption was not just possible, but inevitable. After the McCall defeat, he teamed with Emanuel Steward, one of the greatest trainers in boxing history. Steward rebuilt him technically, insisting that Lennox stop fighting like a brawler and start fighting like a giant. Under Steward's guidance, Lennox refined his jab into a weapon of destruction, learned to control distance, and mastered the art of patience. The transformation was remarkable. Over the next several years, Lewis established himself as a near-untouchable champion. The Rahman rematch in 2001 was perhaps his greatest moment of vindication. Critics mocked him after the first fight, calling him lazy, unfocused, even finished. But Lennox entered the second bout with fire in his eyes. This time, there were no distractions, no shortcuts in training. He stepped into the ring like a man on a mission, and when the opportunity came, he delivered a crushing right hand that knocked Rahman out cold. The image of Rahman sprawled unconscious on the ropes remains one of the most iconic moments in heavyweight history. Lewis didn't stop there. He unified titles, beat David Tua with a masterclass performance, dismantled Michael Grant, and then in 2002 faced his most notorious rival, Mike Tyson. By then, Tyson was far from his prime, but the fight carried enormous hype. The buildup was chaotic, with press conference brawls and wild headlines, but inside the ring, Lennox silenced all doubts. He dominated Tyson, keeping him at bay with his jab before finishing him with a brutal uppercut in the 8th round. It was the final exclamation point on his career, proof that he was not only great, but the true king of the heavyweight division. Then came Vitali Klitschko in 2003, the last great war of Lennox's career. Many expected Lennox to dominate, but Klitschko stunned him with relentless aggression. For 6 rounds, the two giants traded bombs in one of the bloodiest heavyweight battles of the modern era. Klitschko's face was torn open, blood pouring from deep cuts, forcing the referee to stop the fight. Lennox was declared the winner, but the war left many questioning whether the aging champion could withstand much more. Rather than risk decline, Lennox did something almost unheard of. He walked away, at the top, still champion, with nothing left to prove. In 2004, he retired with a record of 41-2-1, the last undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. His name belonged alongside Ali, Foreman, and Holmes. He had silenced critics, avenged his losses, and built a legacy of redemption and dominance. But glory inside the ring often masks pain outside of it. Lennox left boxing with money, fame, and history behind him, but also with the same demons of isolation, regret, and loneliness that had followed him from childhood. The crowning legacy came with its own cost, one that has grown heavier with each passing year. When Lennox Lewis retired, he told the world he was happy to walk away. He said he didn't want to end up like Muhammad Ali, fighting too long and paying the price with his health. At first, it looked like he had succeeded where so many others failed. He lived quietly in Jamaica, then in Miami, investing his money wisely and raising his family away from the chaos of boxing. For years, he appeared content, a rare example of a fighter who walked away with his health and fortune intact. But as time went on, the cracks began to show. Unlike other legends, Lennox didn't remain deeply connected to the sport. He occasionally appeared as a commentator or analyst, but fans often noted he seemed uncomfortable in the spotlight. His voice, once confident, sometimes sounded flat. His demeanor distracted. He rarely engaged in boxing politics, rarely mentored fighters, and avoided most public events. It was as if he had chosen to disappear, a king who abandoned his throne without explanation. This retreat into isolation left many wondering why. Friends suggested that Lennox struggled with trust. Years in boxing had taught him that most people around him wanted something: money, connections, or a piece of his fame. Even in retirement, he felt exploited. Others whispered about his health, noting that his speech was slower, his memory fading, and his body stiff from decades of punishment. At public appearances, he sometimes looked older than his years, moving with the cautious gait of a man carrying invisible injuries. Perhaps the most telling sign was the absence of joy. For someone who had conquered the world, Lennox rarely looked happy in retirement. He gave few interviews, and when he did, his tone was often reflective, even somber. He spoke of regrets, time missed with family, relationships neglected, moments lost to the obsession of boxing. He admitted that being champion meant being alone, and in retirement, that loneliness never fully left him. In 2025, at 59, the picture is even darker. Lennox Lewis is rarely seen in public, fueling speculation about his health. Fans who catch glimpses of him at Hall of Fame events or rare appearances are often shocked at his frail appearance. His once powerful frame seems diminished, his movements stiff, his speech slower. For the man who was once the most dangerous heavyweight on earth, the decline is tragic to witness. He is still wealthy, still respected, but money and legacy cannot shield him from time. The isolation has grown heavier, and whispers of health struggles have become louder. The tragedy of Lennox Lewis in 2025 is not just that he left the ring, it's that he seems to have left the world, living in silence as his body and spirit fade. Lennox Lewis's physical decline is no longer a rumor, it is a visible reality. Fans who have seen him at recent appearances noted his slowed gait, his hunched posture, and the kind of cautious movements that speak louder than words. The Iceman has melted under the weight of time. The warning signs had been there for years. Even in his early retirement, whispers about slurred speech and memory lapses began to surface. Close associates described moments where Lennox repeated himself, forgot key details of past conversations, or seemed disoriented. Some brushed it off as normal aging, but others quietly suggested something darker: long-term damage from decades of absorbing punches. Even though Lennox was never known for taking excessive punishment in fights, the years of sparring, training, and those two brutal knockout losses left scars that could not be erased. Speculation about early cognitive decline and possible CTE has followed him like a shadow. Lennox has never publicly confirmed such struggles, but the signs are undeniable. His voice, once deep and commanding, now sometimes sounds slow and labored. His interviews, rare as they are, lack the sharpness of his prime. His once clear recollections of fights now fade into vague summaries. For a man who prided himself on his intellect and composure, the decline is heartbreaking. And it isn't just his mind. His body tells the same tragic story. Years of training have left him with chronic pain in his knees, hips, and back. The towering frame that once gave him dominance now weighs him down. Former training partners have admitted that even light exercise is difficult for him today. While he still tries to maintain some level of fitness, the truth is that Lennox Lewis is no longer in control of his body. Perhaps most haunting of all is the contrast. Fans who watch highlight reels see a giant in his prime, gliding across the ring, jabbing with precision, finishing fights with clinical brutality. Then they see him today, frail, stiff, cautious. The image of decline is a painful reminder of what boxing does to its kings. The tragedy isn't just that Lennox Lewis is aging, it's that he is visibly paying the price of everything the sport demanded from him, every punch thrown and every blow absorbed. Lennox has admitted in interviews that boxing consumed him, leaving little room for family or personal life. During his prime, he was known for his discipline, his ability to shut out distractions, and his focus on training camps that often lasted months at a time. That discipline gave him greatness, but it also left him distant from those closest to him. He has spoken quietly about the time he missed with his children, the strain on his marriage, and the friendships that slipped away while he pursued glory. Now, at 59, those lost years haunt him. Beyond family, Lennox also carries the sting of being overlooked. Despite his resume, victories over Holyfield, Tyson, and Klitschko, he has often been left out of debates about the greatest heavyweights of all time. Fans and analysts still elevate Ali, Tyson, or Foreman before him. Lennox himself has bristled at this, saying, "I am the last undisputed heavyweight champion. No one else can say that." Yet the lack of recognition eats at him. To live in retirement with a legacy and still feel forgotten is a tragedy in itself. The betrayal of his body has only deepened these regrets. He once promised himself he would walk away before boxing took too much from him. And in some ways, he succeeded. He retired on top, never forced into humiliating decline inside the ring. But outside of it, the damage caught up with him anyway. His careful planning could not stop the long-term effects of a lifetime in combat sports. The memory lapses, the pain, the stiffness. These are not things Lennox could outbox. They are his final opponents, and they are winning. In 2025, Lennox Lewis is not just a retired champion. He is a man weighed down by regrets, overshadowed in the very sport he once ruled, and living with the knowledge that time has stolen more from him than any opponent ever did. For fans, it is tragic to see. For Lennox, it is the cruel reality of life after boxing.